I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for tuning in to Underground USA's The Corner of the Bar podcast. My name is Frank Salvato. Before we get to our twice-weekly talk with Kyle Warren, I wanted to point out the featured piece over at undergroundusa.com titled "The Left's Shameless Abuse of Believe All Women." This was brought about by the ending of the campaign by Graham Plantner, but it goes much deeper into this issue. We've got people on the left, Democrats especially, their sycophant media that always promotes their narrative, that will jump on the bandwagon with movements like Believe All Women or Me Too. And these movements in and of themselves are good. They're based in good ideas. They're based in things that need to happen. I'm not saying that every woman in the world needs to be believed, but you don't just shut them down because you don't like the accusations they're making. And when we look at the Me Too movement that was at its genesis, when we were looking at the casting couches in Hollywood, they were certainly relevant. There was a lot of sexism happening in Hollywood, still happens today, happened in the recording industry, happened in mainstream business for many years. And there were a few people who actually stood up and said no more, put their names and faces on the record, and accused people of what these people have gotten away with for years. So, at its base, the ideas for Believe All Women, which is a little extensive, but you get the idea, and the Me Too movement had a credible and legitimate reason for being. But the politicians on the left and the media have bastardized both of those movements. And even though they say they stand up for women's rights and they want to protect women from abuses and everything else, most of the time they will ignore things that happen to women who happen to be conservative and play up things that happen to women that are not conservative. In this piece, The Left's Shameless Abuse of Believe All Women, I point out some of the major examples, from Joe Biden to Graham Plantner, Andrew Cuomo to Eric Swalwell. When someone from the right comes out and says, someone abused me, someone raped me, someone attacked me, they have to prove themselves before they're taken seriously. If someone from the left says it, they're immediately believed. That double standard has to end for myriad reasons, but it has to end because it's despicable. You don't use the abuse of a woman or abuse of a child or abuse of any human being for that matter. You don't use it as a political pawn, and the media is to blame for almost 99% of this. Just looking at the example of Biden and Tara Reade, she was castigated and not believed from the very beginning. She had to kick and scream to be able to get her story put into the media. That's on the media. That's on the people who craft the narrative and protect the preferred narrative over the truth. So I ask you once again, go on over to undergroundusa.com and read The Less Shameless Abuse of Believe All Women. Especially with the Graham Plantner thing in the news, it's time to readdress this issue and demand better of the media and especially the political left. We can't allow this to be some kind of political pawn game that's played. When someone is abused, someone is raped, someone is beaten, we have to stand up for what's right, not what's politically expedient. When I come back, I talk with Kyle Warren about Iran, Graham Plantner, Islam, and myriad other things at the corner of the bar.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Ever notice how some politicians try to sell you democratic socialism like it's just a friendly neighborhood upgrade? They use the word democratic to make it taste better, like putting cheese on broccoli. But don't be fooled. At its core, it's still socialism. It's the same ideology that wants the government to run your healthcare and your schools, essentially handing over the commanding heights of our economy to so-called experts and bureaucrats. They promise free everything, but we know nothing is actually free. It's paid for with massive taxes and the destruction of the private industries that actually make our country run. It replaces your personal choice with government mandates. Look at history. Socialism is undefeated when it comes to creating misery and equality and poverty. We are a constitutional republic built on individual liberty and competition, not state control and government dependence. The United States thrives on freedom, not socialism light. Let's keep it that way.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Welcome back to Underground USA's Corner of the Bar podcast. My name is Frank Salvato. As I do every Monday and Friday, I talk with Kyle Warren of The Kyle Warren Show, broadcast out of Los Angeles and syndicated nationally from flagship station WGUL AM 860, The Answer, in Tampa and Sarasota, Florida.
I want to start with Iran, though, this morning because Israel evidently shared some intelligence with the Trump administration. And do you think that that might have been one of the reasons why the president switched aircraft coming out of Turkey, coming from the NATO summit?
No, that and the open declaration from the mullahs that he had to be assassinated. Yeah, you know, it pays not to take chances. You've got the opportunity to throw them off guard or confuse them. Why not? You know, it's not like the old Air Force One was obsolete. It was just the old Air Force One. It still has all the stuff on it that he needs to communicate and the protective elements to it. So don't take any chances. I mean, you're coming from Turkey, which is close to the action. So why not? But yeah, Israel's always shared intelligence with us about things like that. They're our ally. As much as the anti-Semitic left in the United States doesn't want that to be the case, they are. And we're in this thing against Iran with Israel together. So why ignore it? We share intelligence with them. They share intelligence with us. We have a common foe, which is the chief sponsor of terrorism around the world, and we're in this together. So I would expect Israel to share intelligence with us, especially about an assassination declaration against the president.
Well, absolutely. And you mentioned, of course, yes, the president would have been very close to the action. You know, Frank, I think it's so important to point out that, you know, there are those that would talk about Iran and say, well, they will never do something that bad, right, quote unquote, or they'd never really use a nuclear weapon because of the retaliation that would come their way. But they don't harbor the same kinds of thought processes, it would seem, that you would normally attribute to any other nation in history that would realize, hey, this is going to get us annihilated if we do this. But they kind of don't care about that kind of stuff at their levels that they're trying to produce these evil deeds.
Yeah, they'd never attack a Marine barracks.
Yeah.
You know, they'd never do that. They'd never sponsor terrorist groups to attack innocents in Israel. They'd never dispatch people to attempt to assassinate the president of the United States on U.S. soil. They'd never do anything like that. Of course they would. They're not afraid of death. You know, they're of the same camp as bin Laden was, and he said it plain as day in his fatwas. We're not afraid of death. We embrace it. That's how we get to Allah. Dying for their cause is like the ultimate thing for them. They don't care. And they don't care if they take out a lot of people along that way, especially the infidel. So that's the devout Islamist mindset, especially when it comes to people like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the mullahs and the people in Hezbollah and Hamas. They value death more than we value life. And when you're dealing with a foe like that, you have to drop the Western ideological curtain in your eyes and see them for what they believe. The Quran is it is to them the literal word of Allah. And the devout believe it hook, line, and sinker, just like Christians believe the Bible. So to be martyred, to give your life for the cause is the ultimate station for them. And when you're facing a foe like that, you have to come to understand that, because it makes them a little harder to deal with than just your regular, for like the communist Chinese. A lot of those people wouldn't want to go to war. They're doing it at the tip of a bayonet from their leaders. But the radical Islamists, and I really wish people would stop saying radical, because devout is more appropriate. The devout Islamists, that's why they celebrate death so much, especially on their side. It's not, hey, we killed the infidels. Hey, Muhammad went to go meet Allah. Isn't that fantastic? And the sooner we come to understand that, the easier, or at least the easier it is to plan how you have to fight your foe.
See, that is so absolutely needed to be heard and understood, and to put all this in context of exactly what this foe is really all about. Gavin Newsom, who has his own problems these days, shall we say, he's time to turn the page, and he's ready to just turn the page and move on from the whole Graham Plattner thing. He says, and I quote, "I'm already, forgive me, turn the page and move on." That's what he said. So what do you think? Obviously, this last week, we've had the Plattner implosion, and I'm sure you probably heard a good part of his video manifesto, or whatever the heck that was. But what do you make of this whole thing with Plattner?
Well, first to Gavin Newsom, drawing from his inner Clinton. Let's move on. Let's just move on from the scandal. We don't need to examine the sexual scandal. Let's just move on.org it. Okay? Let's just do that. What a throwback. Just an absolute clown, Gavin Newsom. They should have seen this when everybody else saw it. If you've got a candidate who's got an SS Nazi tattoo, right, might not be the best one to pick. Bernie Sanders, I'm all for him. I'm going to campaign with him. Are you dim? Well, yeah, I'm Bernie Sanders. I'm dim. I still believe in socialism. Then the first scandal. The first woman comes forward. Hey, man, he's a serial abuser. Well, it's not catching fire with the press, so who cares? Is he going to get the Nazi tattoo removed before the election? That's all we really care about, because, he's explaining it away? Oh, okay. Was that a tweet about he called someone who won the Medal of Honor an idiot? Did he really say that? Yeah, but it's a tweet. We can just bury that. We don't need to. And the media is not picking on him. So he's okay. He's doing well in the polls. There you are, Democrats. If he's doing well in the polls, we can excuse just about anything. Because winning is all that matters. It doesn't matter whether he's a Nazi, or a communist, or a socialist, or a democratic socialist pretending that he's not a Nazi or a communist or a socialist. He's winning in the polls. And that's what's most important to Democrats. He's winning in the polls. How do you not vet someone like this? And how do you not go, that's not a good decision? Well, it took a woman who was a liberal to come out, and then that's the chief piece over at Underground USA today. This believe all women thing, they just exploded it. If you're not a Democrat or a liberal woman, then we don't have to believe you as long as he's winning in the polls. But if you've been raped by the guy and you're not a Democrat, or you don't vote D, or you're not a liberal, if you're not from the right party, quote unquote, then yeah, but you're winning in the polls, and that's more important than you having been raped or abused. This whole believe all women thing of the Democrats is very opportunistic, and we should really, I mean, you say you stand up for women, well, then stand up for women.
Yeah.
Politics shouldn't enter into it. If you've got someone who's running for office, or in any walk of life, really, but I'm using politics as an example. If you've got someone that you want to run for office and there's something in his past where there's multiple people coming forward saying he abuses women, are you nuts? You want to support this guy to be the person who makes decisions for you in government? That's unacceptable. But Democrats, again, they don't, as long as you're viable in the polls, I don't care what you've done. You know, we'll rein him in once he gets elected, because it's about electability. It's not about being a good person. It's about electability.
Well, but isn't it just easier at some point to just try to have integrity or try to, live your life with the, with the idea that you're not going to, support this kind of stuff, and that way, even as a party operative or a politician, you don't have to worry about all this stuff. But boy, do they get themselves into these corners, and then they expect that they can just tell you, oh, forget that, move on.
Well, when did it become okay to say, well, he's a rapist, but he seems to be a nice guy?
He's had his ups and downs,
he's a victim of something. We'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
Because he's got to be a victim if he did something bad. If he raped somebody or abused somebody or killed somebody or assaulted somebody, there's got to be a reason for it, and we can figure that out later. But deep down inside, he's a good guy. I just know it. Well, no. Actions speak louder than words. This guy's, now that the left is saying, oh, he's a horrible person, I guess we can say it out loud. He's a rapist. He got away with it. So, bravo to the woman that came forward. You should have come forward with it sooner. And, they asked her, how come you didn't come forward with it sooner? Well, I like this politics.
I know. That's,
What?
Yeah.
What?
Wow.
How come you didn't come out against Hitler earlier? Well, I like this politics. He wanted free cars for people and stuff. It was something I wanted. So I just went, how come you followed Mao? Well, he was a sharp dresser, had a red book. I mean, how do you live with yourself when you can justify supporting someone who's a rapist or a murderer or who abuses women, who abuses kids? How do you do that? The leftists seem to make an art out of that.
Yeah. Well, he was also on that social media platform that was primarily, what I understand, is for like predators, basically.
Well, and that's another thing. If you're falling into that, you're using things and falling into that category and stuff, from a political standpoint, you might not want to run him for stuff. Even if he was on that platform and not doing anything, even if he downloaded it, didn't know what it was, and it was on his phone, if he's too stupid and he has it downloaded, then maybe not the best decision maker. So why do you want to send him to a seat of power to vote on your behalf?
Yeah. Well,
wouldn't you want somebody who's intelligent enough not to get caught doing something like that?
Yeah.
To represent you? Critical thinking. They don't have it.
Well, in his manifesto, I like to call it, because he just went on and on with this stuff about the system was getting him and all this other stuff. But,
of course.
But he said, I'm just a normal person, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, how many normal people do you know, Frank, that have the Nazi tattoo just for openers?
Well, he's just a normal guy who happens to abuse and rape women, but he's normal. It goes back to what I said at the very beginning about him. The left is going to say sooner or later, and wait for it, because it's coming. As soon as they find someone to run in his place, and they're going to have that little convention now, the nominating convention, because they can't get caught installing another Kamala Harris. God forbid.
Yeah.
You know, someone will come out, maybe The Nation or some other very left-wing publication will come out, finding him to be a victim of something. And that's why he got the Nazi tattoo, and that's why he lashed out against women. And maybe his mom gave him too many timeouts as a child, you know, or maybe he wasn't allowed to go play with the other kids because he was bad one day, and he manifested this hatred for women, you know, or something. But they'll find a way to make this guy a victim in the long run, because no criminal in the United States is responsible for their actions with people on the left. They're not. They have to be a victim somehow. It all comes from that moral relativism thing, and their political need to be able to claim victimhood for anything. For anything. Why is Bernie Sanders a communist? Well, you know, when he was little. You know, why is Ayaka a socialist? Well, when she was a bartender, you know, her tip share wasn't equitable, and that's where it all came from. She's angry. Well, then don't serve that guy again.
Yeah.
You know, there's ways to handle bad tippers if you're a bartender. But not everybody is a victim. Not everybody who kills somebody, not everybody who rapes somebody, not everybody who abuses somebody is a victim and has a really good excuse for it. So let's run them for office.
Yeah. But if you're like a Trump supporter or a conservative, well, then you're not a victim. You're just a bad person.
You've been a rapist since you were born.
Right. On stolen land, no doubt.
Stolen land.
That's right. You know, we talk about these different things, and what the Iranian regime is up to is certainly evil. You know, what Graham Plattner is accused of doing, that is definitely evil. But also, of course, we have the Charlie Kirk trial going on, just an awful, evil act. And first and foremost, I just feel so bad for his widow, Erica Kirk, when she had to actually go there and be in the same room with this accused individual. But now they're going through and they're interviewing in exchange for immunity, as I understand, the alleged shooter's roommate and lover, quote unquote, in all of this.
Well, it's a trial. You know, a lot of people go through it the same way. I feel for Erica Kirk, of course.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's like the woman whose mother was kidnapped on Good Morning America, I believe is the thing. These things happen, and just because they are in a spotlight, we shouldn't give them more empathy just because they're in the spotlight. This is the way murder trials go. It is sad but true. Now, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, and I know some people won't like it because what happened to Charlie Kirk was very, very public, and it affected the people very, very deep down. But going back to the Boston Massacre, everyone deserves a defense. I take John Adams' side with that. The best defense that you can have, and this guy's defense is doing what it should be doing and representing their client. It's not popular with the right, but it's probably popular with the left because they make victims out of everybody. But he deserves his day in court because that's the way our system is.
Oh,
and it's important. And it's important to guard that. Now, that being said, the stuff that's coming out is incredibly damning, and I expect this kid to get convicted and sentenced to death. It's kind of stunning that their defense put forward the mental health issue and then pulled it back, because I think that was his best defense. But, you know, as far as granting immunity to someone who had, material evidence, that's what the prosecutor, that was their call, and it's definitive evidence. Here's a spouse who could have literally exercised the Fifth Amendment right not to testify against someone who is quote unquote the spouse. That could have been argued in court, and there would have been a motion before the judge. Were they common law? Does the Fifth Amendment count? This, that, and the other. But the judge allowed his testimony, and his testimony is not only incriminating, it's lock, stock, and barrel. He kind of felt bad after he did it. Well, we don't excuse that just because you feel bad after you do something like that. You did it, and that's the evidence that you need. So, I hope people don't take what I said the wrong way. There's overwhelming evidence that this kid did this, and he should pay the price. But he does deserve his day in court with a defense that is actually advocating for their client.
Well, but yes, Frank, when you talk about that, what you're talking about and is our legal system. I mean, It has to have integrity or it means nothing. And so we don't have kangaroo courts in this country unless, and I'm not trying to be funny here, but unless it's Donald Trump and you drag him before the court and try to get him on quote unquote something, that's a whole different deal. But in the everyday world, yes, it has to have integrity or it means nothing.
Well, see, now you hit on something there that's, you said I don't want to be funny. It's not. Today, more and more and more, depending on your station in life or your politics, you get two different justice systems. And that's because the judiciary has been tainted. We've got this moral relativism, victimhood thing in that's pervasive through our society. So a lot of juries are already tainted with that poison. But we've got judges sitting on the federal bench who are politicians. The federal judiciary is appointed for a reason. They shouldn't owe one party or have allegiance to one party. They're supposed to be above that. But when you look at the New York judiciary at the federal level, even at the city, even at the state and city level, quite honestly, when you look at the judiciary in D.C., you have to move things out of those jurisdictions because it's almost a foregone conclusion that if the defendant is a Republican, they're going to get convicted. If the defendant is a Democrat, they're going to get a pass. Look at what happened with this judge in Milwaukee, this Dugan, a $5,000 fine for obstructing ICE and doing it overtly, interrupting a deportation, obstructing federal agents in the execution of a warrant. Just $5,000. It's just a fine. You shouldn't go to prison because you seem to be a good person. Deep down, you're a good person. You're probably a victim somewhere down the line.
But if we did something like that on any given day,
you'd go to prison.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said you didn't want to be funny. You hit on it. We do have the integrity of our judicial system is now warped today because of these activist judges. And that's another reason that people should be upset with John Thune and the congressional Republicans. They should have been impeaching these people all along. They have a majority. When bad behavior on the bench warrants removal, that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court justices serve during times of good behavior. That's a quote from the Constitution. And when you are not serving in times of good behavior, they are eligible to be impeached. Yeah. So, you got a majority in the House, you got a majority in the Senate, you have a Republican in the White House who's been demanding that we not have this in our judicial system since he took office. Why aren't we removing why is Boasberg still on the bench?
Well, but what's the hang up in doing that? Is it don't want to rock the boat, don't want to go impeach judges because we could be accused of trying to subvert the legal system in this country? I mean, any number of things, but what's the hang up, do you think?
It doesn't play well in the media. It would give the left something to hang their hat on at the polls. Again, our whole political class is just, they take a knee and they've got the leather boot on their neck of, does it play well in the polls? What's the media going to do with this? So that comes down to the integrity of our elected class.
They're beholden to political parties, and they're held hostage by the media and the polls. It's very rare that you see someone do something or say something that has fidelity to integrity. The one person I can say, wasn't a fan of his when he was elected, but he's turning out to be the only sane person on the left side of the aisle. Is John Fetterman.
John Fetterman, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Look what they did to him. The Democrats hate or Tulsi Gabbard. The Democrats hate their guts. They hate their guts because they didn't walk lockstep politically, and they didn't bow to the polls. Fetterman comes out, calls the people who supported Graham Plattner scumbags. Well, they are.
Yeah.
The guy might not wear a suit and tie to work. He may wear a hoodie. I think he should have a little bit more respect for the decorum of the office. But intellectually, he's not wrong.
No. But you
neither was Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Remember, we all liked Tulsi Gabbard on the right because she had the courage to stand up for her convictions. She was a presidential candidate for the Democrat Party not too long ago.
That's true. Well, but you mentioned something about it doesn't play well in the polls or the media, but that's also because the politicians are looking to make sure they get reelected no matter what. And if you weren't actually trying to do that, if you were not seeking to be a career politician for 40 years, you might make different moves.
Imagine being on your last term when you're term limited and you're a lame duck. You'd be able to vote your integrity all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very important aspect to this.
Our republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, is founded on principles of individual liberty, private property, and limited government. Marxism stands in direct opposition to these ideals. It seeks to abolish private ownership and concentrate power in an all-encompassing state apparatus. History teaches us that Marxist regimes inevitably lead to authoritarianism, economic decline, and the erosion of personal freedoms. The promise of equality under this ideology comes at a grave cost: the loss of liberty itself. To preserve our republican form of government and safeguard future generations' freedoms, we must remain vigilant against any additional advance of Marxist thought within our society. For those who wish to understand this threat more deeply, we at Underground USA recommend Hillsdale College's free course, available online, titled Marxism, Socialism, and Communism. We encourage you to explore this valuable resource. Educate yourself thoroughly on this dangerous ideology, because knowledge is our strongest defense.
Before we part ways today, I want you to revisit a piece that I wrote last week that is still cogent today, titled Trump is Right. Communism is America's Greatest Threat. As I get into conversations about this topic, about communism's advance in the free West, but especially in the United States, I'm always confounded by how young thinking people, Generation Alpha, Generation Z, how they can be courted by socialism with all the examples in the world of how socialism oppresses, fails, and really facilitates genocide on grand scales. When you look at how socialism is turned into communism in the USSR, in China, they just started out communist, that was it. Venezuela, Cuba, it's always ended up with a culling of the useful idiots who helped promote it to come to power. These examples need to be put out there in the public square in a louder and more consumable fashion, because whole generations are being mesmerized by the bullshit that communism, socialism, democratic socialism, Marxism in general, that it promises to the people. It never bears out. Marxism has always failed everywhere it's been tried. And we have to keep that poison away from power in the United States. We're seeing inroads here. And even though the Democratic Socialists of America only have 120,000 people that are full-blooded dues-paying members of that political party, their ideology is poisoning generations, especially those generations coming out of high school and getting into college. It's up to parents and people who care about the younger generation to have conversations about how Marxism, socialism, communism, all of those isms, how they've provided the world with nothing but oppression, poverty, and death. Those are the three things that are common in every communist or socialist regime, from the beginning until their ends. So let's have those conversations, because looking at the midterms and looking especially at 2028, it's a little less Republican versus Democrat and a lot more Americanism versus communism. It's rearing its ugly head, and it's been on the march since Woodrow Wilson, and supercharged in the end of the 60s into the 70s, and under Obama, it just took off on a rocket ship. Biden, just a continuation of Obama. So let's have those conversations. They're important. Don't browbeat somebody. Just have a conversation with them. Talk about the facts, how they feel about them, why they would like to try something like this when it always ends the same way. If you like the podcast, please go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe. Become a paid subscriber. We appreciate you all very, very much. It helps the cause and keeps the conversation going about these important topics. You've been listening to Underground USA's Corner of the Bar podcast. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.
Ever feel like every headline is telling you you're crazy for noticing what's right in front of your eyes? That's not confusion. It's gaslighting. In politics, gaslighting means those who control the narrative, like the Democrat establishment and the far-left Marxists running that machine, make you doubt your own perception of reality, and their lies become the truth. They say the economy is in turmoil, but somehow everything is getting more affordable. Groceries, rent, gas, mortgage rates, all down. They said the border was secure, while millions poured through, creating the chaos of today. They say men can get pregnant and boys can be girls, and if you question it, you're the radical. You're the one that's out of touch. It's not ignorance, it's strategy, a psychological game that turns truth into heresy and common sense into rebellion. It's gaslighting, and Democrats are masters at it. Recognize the gaslight, and you'll see the whole illusion burn away.
A free and independent media is the backbone of our great republic. So it's crucial to have media outlets that aren't influenced by big tech censorship or the leftist mainstream media complex. But that means supporting journalistic outlets that bring us the truth without spinning facts to push a narrative. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee once a month at Starbucks, you can support the free speech mission of undergroundusa.com, an independent, reader-supported, and sometimes irreverent podcast and publication that gives you the real story without the bias. Go to undergroundusa.com/UUSA. That's undergroundusa.com/UUSA to receive a 25% discount on an annual subscription, bringing every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact-checkers. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect our republic. Go out there and seek the truth, my friends. Subscribe to undergroundusa.com today.